I didn't know Bethesda made this. Let's play some Far Cry. Alright, I just thought it was funny to see a bug that's generally known in Bethesda games pop up in a completely different developer's product. I mean, who hasn't seen a spinning plant in any of the Bethesda games? But that's not the point of this video to find bugs. The purpose of this video is to do benchmarking with the Vega Frontier Edition in a modern game using the different drivers that are available for it. We'll start with the professional driver because that is the de facto standard driver for a professional card, and then we'll switch over to using the gaming driver using stock settings, and then we'll tweak them a little with an undervolt overclock, and then again we'll tweak the settings, but this time we'll tweak it to a super low power mode that'll only draw about 100 watts on this power hungry card. What you've been watching is the benchmark tool that is built into Far Cry 5. Sometimes, however, this benchmark does vary, and that is why we are taking the average of 5 different runs in this benchmark, and I will show you an example of how it can vary. For the first example, we'll take this run, the one you just watched. You'll see how the camera flies around this outpost, and you see people running around shooting at each other, and you'll see one guy in the back, he's hammering on some guy with a baseball bat, but nothing real eventful happening. Now let's take that same part of the benchmark with the camera flying around to this outpost on a different run. You'll notice right off the bat there's a lot more action going on. People are shooting at each other, but the camera angle still remains the same. But watch what happens. Wow. That is a drastically different scene to render than the one you just watched. So that's why we're running the benchmark quite a few times to get some actual averages to get real numbers. Our test system will be my workstation. It's a Ryzen 1700 overclocked to 3.8 GHz with 16 GB of Corsair Vengeance 2400 MHz DDR4 memory. I have this paired with a Western Digital Black M.2 NVMe. Of course we'll be using the Vega Frontier Edition as our GPU. All this rests in an ASRock X370 Killer SLI AC motherboard. Powering it all is a Corsair RM850X PSU. In 1080p with the gaming driver at stock settings, we see an average of 73 frames per second with the lows hitting 56 and the peaks at 96. One thing to note is at this resolution, we were only seeing a utilization between 38 and 60%. Never was the GPU 100% utilized. I attribute this to the driver optimizations and the Ryzen CPU. It's a wonderful CPU, but it's always lagged behind in single-thread performance. With the professional driver, we see an uptick in performance with the average of 79 frames per second and the lows at 61 and the highs at 105. It's interesting to say the least, being that the gaming driver is supposed to give you more gaming performance. Next, I undervolted and overclocked the GPU. The clock is running at 1612 MHz at 1100 mV, and the HBM is sitting at 1100 MHz at 1050 mV. I also increased the power draw to a positive 50%. With my card, this is the optimal settings for the most performance. Your results may vary on yours. With these settings and the gaming driver, we see an average of 80 frames per second with the lows dropping all the way down to 50 with the peaks at 106. Next, I underclocked the GPU to 1 GHz and the HBM memory to 800 MHz. And then I set the power draw to minus 50%. With this, I was seeing an average frames per second at 80 with the lows dipping down to 50 and the highs at 106. Really not that much different than the rest of them. Moving along into 1440p, we see the gaming driver at stock settings pull an average of 67 frames per second with the lows at 55 and the highs at 76. The professional driver fared a little better again with the average of 70 frames per second with the lows at 59 and the highs of 84. Overclocked gaming driver did better than professional driver, averaging at 75 with the lows at 60 and a high of 95. In our low power mode, we see an average of 54 frames per second with the lows of 47 and a high of 69. The low power mode is showing off what Vega can do with little power. In 4K, we see things starting to equalize more. The gaming driver at stock pulled an average of 37 frames per second with a low of 33 and a high of 51. The professional driver averaged 38 frames per second with a low of 33 and a high of 50, basically the same result as the gaming driver. Overclocked, the card did do better with an average of 43 and the lows coming in at 39 and a high of 56. In low power mode, the card did not fare well, averaging only 24 frames per second with the lows sitting at 21 and the highs of 31. Next, we look at the ridiculous 8K. And to start off, no single card will be playable at this resolution and this level of detail. We're just not there yet. With the gaming driver in stock settings, we see an average of 11 frames per second. Yes, only 11, with a low of 10 and a high of 14.
Overclocked, we gain a couple of frames, with the average moving up to 13 frames per second and the lows coming all the way up to 11, with the highs sitting at 16. Totally unplayable. Low power mode, or as we'll call it in 8K, slideshow mode, managed to average 7 frames per second, with a low of 6 and a high of only 2 more, 8. 8K gaming just is not happening on a single Vega card, kids. In closing, a Vega Frontier card can game, and when a game is optimized to take advantages of what the underlying architecture is, it can do it well. So what are your thoughts on the results? Would you have done it different? Is 8K gaming something anyone is interested in? Let's start a discussion in the comments below. Click the thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to see more upcoming content. If you have something you'd like to see, leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.